Since today is the anniversary of death of Rabbi Zusha, Rabbi Meshulam Zusya of Anipoli, him and his brother were students of the Maggid of Mezrich, who was the disciple of the Baal Shem Tov, who was a natural healer, traveler, the well springs of shearing abundance that can expand to permeate and also to surround, and from outside and inside, unity of the whole world, from the inside of each of us, and in the far reaches. And the teachings were to be able to come to that place, which all of us are in already, that are also in the source, that are also connected to each other. And he was somebody who embodied this in a special way by nullifying and any sort of division of self, or the I, mine, and also like how to then use that energy for prayer to connect with that source of life, creation, above it, also in it, always, till every single piece of it, which is no longer separate, into the tiniest little separate detail, all the way to the non-separate, without a gap. And him and his brother were so different. His brother embodied a dignified approach of regal atmosphere energy, and Reb Zusha would embody a sense of I can be as low as the low. And in this way, they lived out their parents' desire to have holiness, wholeness in their children. And they gave away riches and possessions and waited 10 years. In other words, they passed many tests in order to be refined of spirit and body, for that wholeness to emerge from them in a simple way through nature. And Rabbi Zusha experienced through witnesses many miracles that occurred for his comfort in the world, as he was willing to not be comfortable, to not have pride, to not have entitlement. And he was known for saying that, on his deathbed, he was crying that he was going to be asked why he wasn't the best version of that he could be. And he was known throughout his life to not really talk much and say, I want or I need, but to know that like there's a self that needs and wants, that what does it really need and want, to get out of the subjectivity. And like, for example, somebody was sent through complaints to a rabbi who sent him to Rabbi Zusha and said, why don't you ask, I think it was the Maggid, he said, why don't you ask him how to handle the suffering of poverty, of lack, of scarcity? And he comes to his house and he sees, in fact, he is living without any luxuries, or like from this man's perspective, there were not apparent luxury items, and there were not brands, and it was not done up to be decorated for beauty, for everybody to pass by and stop, and there was nothing about it. And in fact, one could even say he's missing this, he's missing that, he doesn't have this. And Rabbi Zusha's extreme tolerance of this man, he said, I think that the Maggid should have sent you as someone who suffers. You deserve to learn how to live in a world which is difficult, like you're experiencing. I do not have any problems here. He was saying that he was being honest and authentic, and in his he was taking accountability and responsibility to say that he was content, and there was a resourcefulness in him, and a generosity and respect, and he had the dignity and freedom. And he even said, he kind of was very out of the box and so willing to be in the box. He said what he learned from a thief, 7 things. He really shared this. He shared this as a incredible understanding and dedication and devotion to truth, for the loyalty and the faithfulness to be able to connect the dots and analyze. And he said what the thief does, he keeps to himself. And he said the thief does not distinguish between what is so major, what's so minor, but he takes equally exacting care of all the details. And he says he's optimistic, he's swift, and he invests great effort in what he does. And if he fails at first, he comes back time and again for another try. He would call that persistence, right? And yet Rabbi Zusha would say, kind of treat himself like he's a nobody, like a useless, like a worthless. And when he was with people, he was known to speak out the places where they had gaps of love, as if he had been someone who would act that way, and kind of identify with them from there, inside of that little box of someone who has to deny what they did and their gaps, and recognize it can be filled with love too. And he would confess it like in such a way, he would say, and it would be sometimes people who didn't even have the best intentions with him, who would have the largest transformations of witnessing for him the incredible empathy, where he didn't want to fall out of love with God. He was able to be godly and loving, and he had some sense of emotional well-being. Energy would just pass through him. He was known for moving and jumping and making handstands. He had physical health, and obviously he had a significant other and spiritual well-being, and he was fun and creative, and he had like a work, and people, he would fundraise for things, and there was a sense of play also with that he could be free, and he didn't suppress. He really didn't suppress. He was a great role model for even taking something literally that you've heard a million times for the first time, hearing it in a new way, in a pious way, almost like being a witness for the possible newness, and without the customs and the rituals and the traditions there, but still doing the right thing. And for the sake of everything being related. And he wouldn't necessarily say I need, and sometimes there was some people who were a little suspicious of this, like, isn't there a time you have to say I need or I want? And they tested him. His attendant said, we're not going to bring him food till he asks I need. And in fact, they witnessed a person there arrived after traveling 3 days, just arrived and said, I'm here to bring Rabbi Zusha some food. They saw delicacies prepared with care and precision, like to make perfect meals, and all prepared for this trip 3 days before this had even happened. And they were in shock, and they realized the protection of Rabbi Zusha. And it was said that this man had had a dream or a vision, or someone in that town had told him. It's not clear, I forget to me, but that he had been guided in order for some fortune to come of some area of life, for him to have someone deliver all this. And obviously the attendants didn't want to try that again, but I'll finish with something you can even find on Wikipedia, where he was in a session with the Maggid, and he was known to be very absorbed and invigorated by the teachings, where they hit inside of him, and where he was touched and willing to be touched there and open and let go. And so one time the Maggid was sharing, the Maggid spoke, and the Baal Shem Tov traveled around. The Maggid stayed in one place and was rich. The Maggid went to anybody. He was really not interested in only spending time with the rabbis or the Jewish scholars, like his, where he was maybe received a lot of his education. He traveled around to be among people who lived in the land, or people who lived, in tents, or people who lived in different kinds of dwellings, or people who lived traveling lifestyles, or, people who lived all different kinds of careers, both indigenous kind of people and careers, and more commercial or city life and metropolitan. And he didn't really believe that somebody who had a great, name was as good as somebody who had an honest desire for goodness. And not honest desire, but like a basic primal kind of desire, like all of himself. He felt that somebody who was focusing on good thoughts while doing work with animals or the land or crafts, was just as holy in that moment of oneness as somebody who was reading something or saying something, and the whole giving of self, kind of going out in nature. Other disciples mentioned that was a big need for people, to be in nature, to be outside, to be connected with the physical in such a way that it's a direct connection, unified without distraction. Bringing godliness and wholeness of goodness into creative consciousness, awareness of the present moment of being in physical matter, thickness. And so Reb Zusha heard the Maggid saying, God spoke, and trying to say something, and Reb Zusha paused and arrived and abided in God spoke, God spoke, God spoke. And he kept repeating it and getting more involved. And he asked him to sit outside the room for the class. And so you might say many of the people of my generation, I'm 31 years old, I have ADHD, focus issues, and so on. And then there's all these Montessori schools and nature schools and movement and balance. And it's really interesting how he made such an impact on pretty much the collective and the mainstream. And I believe in some ways, to me, he represents such a powerful leader because of his ability to tip, as Malcolm Gladwell says in The Tipping Point, he tipped something for everybody through his teachers and through all of us. And may his soul have an elevation, and may we all pay it forward what he was willing to be for us. And experiencing the medicine and the shyness of power connecting in, but also having the sheath on the outside with symbols and spontaneity and accountability and play as our values, our inner Torah. And we can have successful sustainability as we're intentional about the expected duration of relationships, and we recognize trust is earned and respect is given, and that our lymph, our immunity, and our time management, and giving ourselves permission to relax and being something, being with being, being from or for, being for of, being good.